Kia ora te whānau, welcome back. It's a little bit windy outside today, but we'll see how we go. Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk about something, people often look at the border war and see one big kind of united front, right? They see the brown uniforms, the Casspirs, the Rifles, the Biffles, and they assume we were all singing from the same hymn sheet, But if you were there, if you were in the dust of Sector 10, you knew there was a great divide, One side you had the SADF, the South African Defence Force. On the other you had us, right, Koevoet. And there was rivalry that at times felt as heated as the bush itself. I thought a lot about why that was, why the disdain, why the side-eye from the stateside boys, in their starched browns. But to understand it, you have to, know the difference between a machine and a pack, The SADF was a machine. It was massive, it was professional and governed by, a top brass brigade in Pretoria who lived and breathed the manual. They had strict rules on engagement, they moved in large coordinated formations. They had a chain of command that felt like it, went on for miles. And when a national service kid arrived at the border, he was a cog in that machine, he did what he was told. And he did it by the book because, that was his Bible. And then there was us, the Zulu Teams, Koevoet. We didn't operate by the book, we operated by the Spoor, We had a level of autonomy that drove, the SADF colonels absolutely mad, If we picked up a track at 10 a.m, we didn't have to wait for clearance from an HQ 300 kilometres away to follow it across the cut line, or into a specific area. We just went, Our commanders, the guys like Brigadier Dreyer, trusted his men on the ground, He knew that in the bush, information had a half-life. And if you don't act on it in minutes, it's dead. We were hunters, and a hunter doesn't ask for permission to chase the lion. But it wasn't just the tactical freedom, it was, well, let's call it the aesthetic, right? To the SADF, discipline was measured by the shine on your boots and the length of your hair. They'd see us rolling back into Oshikadi after a week in the bush, and, we looked like something out of a nightmare. We had long hair, we had beards that were caked in white dust, and, we were wearing T-shirts and shorts that hadn't seen a washing machine in 7 days. We looked unkempt, we looked wild. I remember the looks we'd get from the young national service guys, it was a mix of pure terror and deep resentment. They were stuck in a trench or a base or, maybe in a gun tower, polishing their R4s and worrying about whether their berets were on straight, while we were flying past in Casspirs, maybe with a 50 cal or, twin 30 cal Brownings mounted on the roof, looking like pirates. They saw a lack of parade ground discipline as a sign that we were out of control, but they didn't understand that our discipline was a bit different. It was the discipline of the track. It was the discipline of knowing that, if your turret-mounted machine gun jammed because you were too lazy to check the links or do the maintenance, you were most likely dead. We didn't care about the shine on our boots. We cared about the sound of the engine in front of us and, the eyes of our trackers. There was a fundamental jealousy there too. We were effective. The kill ratios told a story that the SADF didn't always like to hear because we had the freedom to be aggressive, to be fast, and to be unconventional. We were bringing in results. And in any bureaucracy, which is what the SADF was, right? The guys who break the rules and get the results are always going to be hated by the guys who follow the rules and get stuck in the mud. We were the Cowboys to them, and maybe we were, but when the heat was on and the Spoor was fresh, there wasn't a single man in those starched browns who didn't secretly wish that he had the freedom we had, even if he'd never, admit it in the mess hall or the base NCO pub, From a male, band of brothers type psychological perspective, the friction between the SADF and Koevoet wasn't just about military tactics. It was about the fundamental way that men find meaning and identity, The machine offers security through conformity. It tells a man that as long as he follows the manual and, polices his appearance, he's good. But for many, this is a psychological cage that replaces individual agency with bureaucratic compliance. The pack, however, operates on the competence hierarchy. In the pack, your status isn't granted by, a starched collar or a rank, assigned by a distant office. It's earned by your ability to read the Spoor and keep your brothers alive. This creates a raw, authentic form of self-worth that no machine can manufacture. The resentment, I believe, from the starched Browns was, often a projection of their own stifled desire for agency. They didn't hate the Cowboys because they were messy. They hated them because the Cowboys proved that, a man is most alive when he's trusted to act on his own judgment. The moral is simple. True discipline isn't found in the shine of a boot, but in the weight of the responsibility you're willing to carry when the rules run out. Think on that for a while. Let me know your thoughts down below. Ka kite anō. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you all next time.